She thought she would marry a blind millionaire, but on wedding night, everything changed. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. Her name was Emily Carter, a young woman whose life had been shaped by hardship and quiet endurance. She grew up in a small town where everyone knew everyone's struggles, and hers were not a secret. Her father's business had collapsed years ago, leaving behind a trail of debt that clung to her family like an invisible chain. Her mother worked double shifts at the diner. Her brother picked up construction jobs when he could, and Emily herself carried 2 part-time jobs just to keep the electricity from being cut off. Still, no matter how hard they tried, the weight of bills only grew heavier. One evening, while Emily folded clothes in the laundromat where she worked, a stranger approached her with a proposition that sounded unreal. He was a tall, sharp-dressed man who introduced himself only as Mr. Hayes. His voice was steady, his eyes unreadable. He said he represented a wealthy family in the city, and they had an unusual request: a marriage. Emily nearly laughed, but his face remained grave. He explained that the heir of a powerful business empire, a man known as Adrian Blackwood, was in need of a bride. There would be no expectations of love, only the appearance of stability for the family's reputation. In exchange, her family's debts would be cleared, and she would receive enough money to start fresh. Emily's chest tightened. It sounded like a bargain with the devil. She asked why Adrian, a millionaire, could not find a wife of his own choosing. Mr. Hayes lowered his voice and told her that Adrian was blind. His life had become a target for gossip, for cruel rumors, and the family wanted to silence those whispers with a respectable marriage. Emily stared at the stranger, her hands still clutching a damp shirt. Her first instinct was to refuse. Marriage was supposed to be about love, not contracts, not transactions. Yet when she thought of her mother's tired hands scrubbing plates until they bled, of her brother standing in the cold waiting for day labor that often never came, her resolve wavered. 2 weeks later, Emily found herself walking down the aisle of a grand cathedral. The marble floors gleamed beneath her shoes, the chandeliers burned with golden light, and the air was thick with perfume and judgment. Every eye followed her as she approached the altar, whispers echoing like sharp needles against her skin. At the end of the aisle stood Adrian Blackwood. His tall frame was draped in a dark, tailored suit. His eyes, a startling gray, seemed unfocused as he faced the crowd. He held a cane, polished and severe, and his expression was unreadable. To the world, he was a man struck by blindness, robbed of sight, but still carrying the weight of power and fortune. To Emily, he was a stranger, the key to saving her family and the chain that would bind her future. The ceremony moved swiftly, the words of the priest falling over her like water she could barely feel. When it came time for the vows, her lips trembled as she repeated them. She felt the judgment of the Blackwood relatives behind her, the sting of their disdain. She was the outsider, the poor girl from nowhere, marrying into wealth that was not meant for her. When the rings were exchanged, Adrian's fingers brushed against hers, firm and steady. For a brief moment, his eyes flickered, as though catching light, and Emily's breath caught. She reminded herself he could not see her. He was blind. And yet something in that brief contact unsettled her. As the applause rose around them, Emily whispered to herself, "This is not love. This is survival." But deep inside, a seed of doubt began to grow. Was Adrian truly blind? Or was there something more hidden behind those gray eyes? The answer would come sooner than she expected, on the night when all secrets are hardest to keep, the wedding night. The grand reception hall of the Blackwood estate shimmered with opulence. Crystal chandeliers stretched overhead, their light scattering across polished floors like shards of sunlight trapped in glass. Waiters moved with precision, carrying trays of champagne and delicate hors d'oeuvres that seemed too fragile to touch. Guests in silk gowns and tailored tuxedos filled the room with murmurs, their smiles sharp, their laughter edged with judgment. Emily stood at Adrian's side, her hand resting on his arm, her smile fixed like porcelain. Inside, her chest trembled with unease. She had expected the ceremony to be the hardest part, but the reception proved worse. Here, there was no script of vows, only the harsh theater of wealth and reputation. Every glance weighed her down, every whispered word seemed designed to cut her deeper. She leaned slightly toward her new husband. "Do they always stare like this?" she whispered. Adrian's expression did not change. His pale gray eyes remained still, unfocused, and his tone carried no warmth. "They are staring at the scandal," he replied softly. "They want to see if the poor girl looks terrified." Her breath caught, so he knew what they thought of her. She wanted to snap back, to tell him she was not terrified but furious. Yet she bit her tongue, remembering the terms of their arrangement. She was here to survive, nothing more. As the evening stretched, Emily excused herself and wandered near the marble columns that lined the room. That was when she overheard two women, their voices dripping with disdain. "Can you believe it? The Blackwood heir marrying someone like her?" one sneered. "She should be grateful. A blind husband, all that money, and still she dares to stand proud," the other replied. "Give it a year. She will slip. They all do." Emily's nails dug into her palm. The sting of their words burned hotter than any flame. She had promised herself she would ignore the cruelty, but hearing it so boldly made her blood boil. She turned sharply, ready to confront them. But before she could speak, a firm hand touched her shoulder. Adrian, though his gaze appeared empty, his posture carried authority. His voice, low and commanding, silenced the women at once. "If you have something to say about my wife," he said, "you may address me directly." The women stammered, their confidence crumbling under his tone. They muttered apologies and retreated, leaving Emily staring at Adrian in shock. For a brief moment, she thought she saw his eyes flicker again, as though catching light, but she quickly pushed the thought aside. He released her shoulder and turned away, walking with the measured step of a man who relied on his cane. The rest of the evening dragged on, filled with shallow conversations and veiled insults. By the time Emily climbed into the sleek black car beside Adrian, her head throbbed. Silence hung between them during the drive back to the estate, broken only by the hum of the engine. When they arrived at the sprawling mansion, Emily stepped into a world that felt more like a museum than a home. Tall ceilings loomed above, gilded portraits lined the walls, and every surface gleamed as though untouched by human hands. A butler approached with a respectful bow and handed Emily a folded document. She frowned and unfolded it. Lines of typed words stared back at her. Rules, conditions, restrictions. Adrian's voice filled the hall, calm and distant. "That is the contract. You are to remain here for 1 year. You are not permitted to leave without my consent. You are not to speak of this arrangement to anyone. And you are not to ask questions about my past." Emily's throat tightened as she read the final line. "Breaking any of these terms will result in immediate annulment, and the financial support promised to your family will be withdrawn." Her hands trembled. She looked at Adrian, standing tall with his cane, his expression carved from stone. For the first time that night, fear gave way to anger. "So this is marriage?" she whispered, her voice cracking. "A list of rules and silence?" Adrian did not flinch. "This is protection. For you and for me." Emily folded the paper with shaking hands, her heart pounding in her ears. She thought of her mother, of her brother, of the debts that shackled them all. She had no choice but to sign. With a deep breath, she picked up the pen offered by the butler and scrawled her name across the bottom of the contract. The ink bled into the page, sealing her fate. That night, as she lay in the cavernous bedroom of the Blackwood mansion, staring at the ceiling high above, Emily whispered to herself, 1 year, just 1 year. But deep inside, she knew nothing about this marriage would be simple. Something about Adrian Blackwood did not add up. Something hidden lingered behind those gray eyes. And soon, she would discover the truth. The night pressed heavily against the tall windows of the Blackwood mansion, and Emily felt the silence echo louder than any crowd she had faced earlier. Her footsteps seemed to linger in the grand hallway as she walked toward the bedroom that now belonged to her. The marble floors reflected her image back at her, a lone figure swallowed by wealth that never felt like hers. Inside the bedroom, the air was chilled, carrying the faint scent of polished wood and lavender. Emily sat at the edge of the vast bed, her fingers brushing across the embroidered sheets. She whispered again, almost as a prayer. 1 year, just 1 year. The sound of the door opening startled her. Adrian stepped inside, his cane tapping softly against the floor. His tall figure seemed to command the room, even without sight. Emily lowered her gaze, unsure if she should speak. Adrian's voice broke the silence. "Did you read the contract carefully?" "Yes," she replied, her voice steady though her heart raced. "Every word." "Then you know your place here," he said firmly. Anger sparked in her chest, but she swallowed it down. "Yes, I know my place." Adrian moved closer, his steps deliberate, until he stood only a few feet away. His pale gray eyes fixed in her direction, and though they were supposed to be blind, Emily felt an unsettling sharpness in them. He reached out slowly, his hand brushing against her cheek. "You are trembling," he said softly. Emily's breath caught. Anyone would tremble, marrying a stranger with rules for vows. For the first time, a flicker of emotion crossed his face. His lips curved into the faintest shadow of a smile, but it vanished quickly. "You are braver than they think," he murmured. The room thickened with tension. Emily dared not move, caught between fear and a strange warmth that pressed against her defenses. His hand lingered a moment longer before he drew it back, his expression once again unreadable. "I will not harm you," Adrian said, turning toward the window. "But you must understand, trust is not given freely in this house." Emily stared at his back, her mind spinning. She wanted to ask why. She wanted to demand what had hardened him so completely. But the contract's rules echoed in her memory. No questions about his past. So she bit her tongue and remained silent. Later that night, when Adrian had left for his private study, Emily wandered restlessly through the mansion. The hallways seemed endless, lined with paintings of ancestors who looked down on her with cold eyes. She passed by a set of double doors left slightly ajar. Inside, the glow of a fire illuminated a room lined with shelves of books and maps. Curiosity tugged at her, but before she could step closer, the door creaked open wider. Adrian stood there, his face shadowed, his hand still holding the cane. Yet for an instant, Emily was certain she had seen him move without it. Her heart leapt. She quickly looked down, pretending she had only been passing by. "I could not sleep," she admitted. His voice was calm but sharp. "This house can feel heavy. You will get used to it." "Oh." He closed the door firmly, and the sound echoed like a warning. Emily retreated to her room, her mind restless. She replayed the evening in her head, the way his eyes had seemed to follow her, the way his hand had found her cheek with such precision. If he were truly blind, how could he move with such certainty? Lying awake in the vast bed, Emily pressed her hand against her racing heart. She thought of the contract, of the whispers at the wedding, of Adrian's cold warning, and yet, layered beneath all of it, she could not forget the moment his voice softened, the way he had said she was braver than they thought. Confusion warred with fear, and fear with curiosity. She told herself she would keep her distance, that she would play the role written for her and endure the year. But deep down, she knew her resolve was already unraveling. Something about Adrian Blackwood was not as it seemed, and Emily Carter, whether she wanted to or not, was determined to uncover the truth. Morning sunlight spilled through the tall windows of the Blackwood mansion, painting golden lines across the floor. Emily rose from the bed with a heavy sigh, her body weary from a night of restless thoughts. She had spent hours replaying every detail of Adrian's behavior. The gentle brush of his hand against her cheek, the sharpness of his eyes, the certainty in his movements, it all gnawed at her. If he were truly blind, how could he be so precise? As she descended the grand staircase, the mansion's stillness pressed against her. The butler waited in the foyer, his posture stiff as he handed her another folded paper. "Madam, these are the rules of the household," he said respectfully. Emily opened the document. Her eyes scanned the lines. Daily schedules, times for meals, areas she was forbidden to enter. The list felt more like a prison manual than a guide to her new life. At the bottom, a signature line awaited her compliance. Her throat tightened. She wanted to protest, to demand why her every move had to be controlled. But the memory of her mother's tired eyes and her brother's calloused hands silenced her rebellion. For their sake, she had to endure. With trembling fingers, she signed her name again, sealing another layer of her cage. During breakfast, the dining room felt colder than the marble beneath her feet. Adrian sat at the far end of the long table, his posture regal, his cane resting against the chair. He ate with precise movements, as though every gesture had been rehearsed. Emily pushed her food around her plate, unable to find her appetite. Finally, she spoke. "Do you always live by rules and contracts?" Adrian's pale gray eyes lifted in her direction. His voice was even, carrying no hint of emotion. "Rules protect us from betrayal. Contracts ensure loyalty." Her hands curled into fists beneath the table. "And what about trust?" she asked quietly. The faintest pause hung in the air before he answered. "Trust is the most dangerous illusion of all." Emily's heart pounded. She wanted to challenge him, to tell him that trust was the only thing that made life worth living. But she bit her tongue, feeling the invisible weight of the contract pressing against her. Later that day, she wandered into the garden behind the mansion. It was vast, filled with roses and trimmed hedges that stretched like a maze. For the first time since her arrival, she felt a breath of freedom. She sat on a stone bench, the sunlight warming her skin, and allowed herself a small smile. But peace did not last long. She sensed his presence before she heard his footsteps. Adrian appeared at the edge of the garden path, his cane tapping lightly against the stones. He moved toward her with deliberate grace, each step confident, unhesitating. "You should not wander alone," he said, his voice calm but firm. Emily rose from the bench, anger stirring inside her. "Am I not even allowed to walk in the garden?" Adrian stopped a few feet away, his face unreadable. "This house is full of eyes. Not all of them are kind. Be cautious." Her breath caught. For a moment, his words felt less like a command and more like a warning. She studied his expression, searching for cracks in his cold exterior. His gray eyes glimmered faintly in the sunlight, and once again, she wondered, did he truly see her? That evening, Emily found herself standing before a mirror in her room, staring at her reflection. She whispered, "How long can I keep living like this?" As she reached for the lamp, her gaze drifted to the window across the hall. Adrian stood there, framed by the glow of the moonlight. His posture was still, almost statuesque, but his eyes were fixed outward, unblinking. Emily froze. The cane leaned unused against the wall beside him. Her heart hammered. The truth clawed at her mind. He was watching the night sky, and blind men did not watch stars. Emily backed away, her body trembling. The rules, the contracts, the warnings, they were not just about control. They were hiding something deeper, something far more dangerous. And for the first time, she realized she was not just a bride bound by duty. She was a woman trapped inside a mystery. A mystery named Adrian Blackwood. The days that followed felt like walking on glass. Emily carried out her role in the Blackwood mansion, following the rules written in the contract, but her mind never stopped circling around the truth she had glimpsed. Adrian was not as blind as he claimed. The image of him standing at the window without his cane, gazing at the night sky, refused to leave her thoughts. She told herself to keep quiet. The contract forbade questions, and breaking it would destroy her family's only chance of survival. Yet her heart rebelled, her curiosity growing stronger each time she crossed paths with Adrian. One afternoon, while she arranged flowers in a tall vase, she felt his presence before she saw him. Adrian entered the parlor, his cane tapping lightly against the floor. His expression was calm, but his gray eyes flickered briefly in her direction with unnerving precision. "You like roses," he remarked. Emily's fingers stilled on the petals. "How would you know?" she asked softly. For a moment, silence stretched between them. Then his lips curved faintly. "A man does not need sight to notice what pleases his wife." Her pulse quickened. The answer was clever, but it did not erase the suspicion gnawing at her. She lowered her gaze, hiding the storm inside her. That night, a sudden rainstorm swept over the city. Thunder rattled the windows, and lightning cast fleeting shadows across the mansion walls. Emily woke shivering, her forehead damp with fever. She struggled to sit up, the room spinning around her. Moments later, the door opened. Adrian entered swiftly, without hesitation, and crossed to her bedside. His movements were sure, his hands finding the lamp, the basin, the cloth with no fumbling. He dipped the cloth into cool water and pressed it gently to her forehead. "Rest," he said, his voice low but steady. "You are burning with fever." Emily blinked through the haze, her heart pounding. Blind men could not move like that. Blind men did not replace cloth after cloth with practiced care, did not watch over someone through the night with eyes that seemed to follow every breath. Through the long hours, she felt his presence beside her bed. Each time she stirred, his hand was there, adjusting the blanket or cooling her skin. His silence was both comforting and terrifying. By morning, her fever broke. She opened her eyes to see him sitting in the chair, his cane leaning untouched against the wall once again. His gray eyes were fixed on her, calm, steady, too steady for the lie he lived. Emily swallowed hard, her voice a whisper. "Why are you doing this?" Adrian rose, his expression unreadable. "Because you are my wife, and I do not abandon what is mine." "No?" He left the room before she could respond, leaving her alone with a truth she could no longer ignore. Adrian Blackwood was hiding something, and Emily Carter was determined to uncover it, even if the answer shattered everything she thought she knew. Emily recovered quickly from the fever, but her heart did not find rest. Each glance at Adrian, each sound of his deliberate footsteps, only deepened the storm inside her. She could no longer convince herself that his blindness was real. The way he moved, the way his eyes seemed to pierce through her, the way he had cared for her through the night. It all pointed to a truth he worked tirelessly to hide. One evening, when the mansion grew quiet and the servants had retired, Emily found herself wandering again. The rain had stopped, leaving the hallways hushed except for the echo of her own steps. Her eyes caught a sliver of light leaking from beneath a heavy door at the end of the corridor. Her heart pounded. That door had always been locked. Yet tonight, it stood slightly ajar. Emily pushed it open, and what she saw stole the breath from her lungs. Inside, the room was nothing like the rest of the mansion. No chandeliers, no cold portraits. Instead, walls were lined with maps, stock market charts, and files spread across a massive desk. Screens glowed with streams of numbers, shifting rapidly in patterns she could not understand. And at the center of it all stood Adrian, tall and commanding, his gray eyes alive with focus as they scanned the glowing data. He was reading. He was watching. Emily froze, her body pressed against the doorframe. The truth blazed in front of her. Adrian Blackwood was not blind at all. For a moment, she hoped he had not noticed her. But then his voice cut through the silence. "You should not be here," she gasped, stepping back. "You can see," she whispered, the words trembling out of her. "All this time you could see." Adrian turned slowly toward her, his face shadowed by the glow of the screens. He did not deny it. Instead, he set the cane aside, no longer needing the pretense. His eyes locked on hers with sharp intensity. "Yes," he said at last, "I can see." Emily's chest tightened, anger and betrayal flooding her veins. Why lie? Why pretend to be blind? Why marry me under falsehood? Adrian's expression hardened. Because the world around me is filled with greed and deception. People want what I have, not who I am. When they believed I was blind, their masks slipped. I saw their true faces. And you, he paused, his gaze cutting into her. You accepted this marriage without question. Was it for me, or for the money that came with my name? Her heart cracked at his words. I did it to save my family. Do you think that makes me a liar? Do you think that makes me less human? The room pulsed with tension, the silence louder than thunder. Adrian's jaw tightened, but his eyes revealed something deeper than coldness, fear. Fear of betrayal, fear of being used again. Emily's voice shook, yet it held strength. If you cannot trust me, then why keep me here at all? Adrian stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. Because, Emily, I need to know if you are different from the rest, and that is the one truth I cannot afford to gamble on. Her pulse raced as his words hung between them, sharp and unyielding. In that moment, Emily realized she was not just bound by a contract. She was trapped in a dangerous game of secrets, lies, and a man who could see far more than he admitted. And for the first time, she wondered if she would survive it. Emily's chest heaved as she stood in the secret room, the glow of the monitors throwing sharp light across Adrian's face. His confession still rang in her ears. He was not blind. He had never been blind. The truth left her reeling, but the weight of his accusation cut even deeper. "You think I married you for money," she said, her voice trembling with both fury and hurt. "You think I am just like the rest." Adrian's eyes narrowed. "What else am I supposed to believe? Every person who has stood beside me wanted something. Power, influence, wealth. Do you expect me to think you are different?" Emily's hands clenched at her sides. "Yes," she cried, "because I am different. I did not ask for this marriage. I agreed because my family was drowning in debt. And your offer was the only lifeline. Does that make me a criminal? Does that make me a liar?" Adrian stepped closer, his tall frame casting her into shadow. "It makes you desperate. Desperation drives people to betray faster than greed." Her eyes burned, tears threatening to spill. "And what about you, Adrian? You lied to the entire world. You lied to me. You let me walk into this marriage believing I was marrying a blind man. You tricked me. So tell me, who is the liar here?" The words struck him like a blow. For a moment, his mask cracked, and a flicker of guilt flashed across his face. But pride quickly sealed it away. His voice hardened. "Do not turn this back on me." Emily shook her head, her voice breaking. "I am your wife, yet you see me as nothing more than a suspect. You do not want love, you want proof. And no matter what I do, you will never see me for who I really am." The air between them thickened, the silence suffocating. Adrian's fists tightened at his sides, as if fighting a battle inside himself. His eyes, so sharp and calculating, softened for the briefest moment, and then hardened again. Finally, he spoke, his tone colder than ice. "If you cannot endure this arrangement, the door is always there." Emily's breath caught. His words sliced through her like glass. She wanted to scream, to demand why he would chain her to a contract if he doubted her so deeply. But instead, she turned away, her voice low and heavy with pain. "You may see the world, Adrian Blackwood, but you are blind in the ways that matter most." With that, she fled the room, her footsteps echoing through the dark halls of the mansion. Alone in his study, Adrian stared at the monitors, but his mind was far from the numbers on the screen. Emily's words echoed in his chest like a wound that refused to close. And for the first time in years, the man who trusted no one felt something he could not control: doubt. The days that followed were heavy with silence. Emily kept to herself, walking the halls of the mansion like a ghost. She replayed Adrian's words again and again, each one cutting deeper than the last. He had invited her into a marriage built on lies, accused her of greed, and then dared her to leave. And yet, she could not leave. The contract bound her, and her family's survival depended on her staying. One morning, the sound of hurried footsteps filled the hall. A maid rushed toward Emily, holding a newspaper in trembling hands. "Madam, you should see this." Emily unfolded the paper, her heart sinking as she read the headline. "Poor bride tricks blind millionaire into marriage." Her hands shook as she scanned the vicious article. It claimed she had deceived Adrian, that she had preyed on his supposed blindness to secure his fortune. The story painted her as a manipulator, a shameless gold digger. Her vision blurred with tears. She whispered, "This is not true. None of this is true." Servants in the hall avoided her gaze, their silence heavier than words. Everywhere she turned, suspicion clung to her like poison. Even those who had once shown her kindness now stepped aside as if she carried a disease. When she confronted Adrian in his study, the paper clutched in her hand. His reaction was unreadable. He stood by the window, sunlight cutting across his sharp features. "You saw this?" she demanded. "Yes," he replied calmly. Her voice broke with fury. "And you said nothing? You let them drag my name through the mud? Let them humiliate my family? Do you not care what they are saying?" Adrian's eyes met hers, cold and steady. "The world will always talk. Fighting every rumor is a waste of strength." Emily's chest tightened, anger surging through her. "This is not just a rumor. This is my life. My family will read this. My mother, my brother, they will see me branded as a liar. And you will let them believe it." What? For the first time, A flicker of conflict passed through his expression, but he did not answer. His silence was louder than denial. Tears stung Emily's eyes as she turned away. I thought the cruelty of strangers was unbearable, but the cruelty of a husband who says nothing, that is worse. That night, unable to breathe under the weight of disgrace, Emily packed a small bag. She left the mansion quietly, her footsteps echoing down the cold marble hallway. Outside, the night air was sharp against her skin, but she welcomed it. For the first time since her wedding, she felt something close to freedom, even if it was poisoned with heartbreak. Back in his study, Adrian discovered her absence. For a long moment, he stood in the doorway, his face pale in the moonlight. His hand tightened around the cane he no longer needed, and in his chest, a truth he had fought to deny rose with crushing force. Emily was gone, and the silence she left behind was unbearable. The night Emily left the mansion, the city lights stretched endlessly before her, yet she felt no comfort in their glow. She walked with trembling steps, her small bag clutched tightly in her hand, her heart heavy with despair. Every whisper of the cruel article echoed in her mind. Every cold silence from Adrian replayed like a wound that refused to close. Meanwhile, back at the mansion, Adrian stood alone in his study. For years, he had believed mistrust was his shield, that distance was his weapon. But as he stared at the empty chair Emily once occupied, a truth struck him harder than any betrayal. He had driven her away, not because of her flaws, but because of his own fear. The following morning, headlines erupted again, but this time the words were different. Cameras flashed as Adrian Blackwood, the man the world believed to be blind, stepped onto a stage before a crowd of reporters. He held no cane. His gray eyes were steady as he faced the world. "I have a confession to make," he said, his voice carrying through the air. "For years, I pretended to be blind. I did it because I wanted to see the truth of people's hearts. I thought if they believed I was weak, I would learn who truly stood beside me. But in that pursuit, I became the greatest liar of all. And the one who has suffered most because of my deception is my wife, Emily Carter." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Adrian's voice grew heavier, yet stronger. "She did not trick me. She did not marry me for money. She married me to save her family. And she has carried my cruelty with grace. If there is any shame, it is mine. If there is any deceit, it belongs to me." The confession spread like fire, silencing the rumors that had destroyed Emily's name. Later that evening, Emily stood at the edge of her childhood home, staring at the small porch where her mother once sat to rest after long shifts. Her heart ached, torn between relief and fear, when she heard the sound of footsteps behind her. She turned and there he was. Adrian, no longer hiding behind a cane, no longer cloaked in lies. He walked toward her with steady eyes, every step filled with purpose. "I came to ask for forgiveness," he said, his voice raw. "Not for the man I pretended to be, but for the man I truly am. I cannot undo the pain I caused, but I can spend every day proving my love, if you let me." Oh, Emily's eyes filled with tears. She wanted to resist, to remind him of every wound, every cruel word. But then she remembered the fevered night when he sat by her side, the quiet strength in his care, and the way his voice now trembled with sincerity. Adrian pulled something from his pocket. Not a contract, not a condition, just a simple ring, gleaming softly in the fading light. He sank to one knee. "This time, Emily, there are no rules, no contracts, only love. Will you be my wife in truth?" Her tears spilled freely, but a smile broke through. She nodded, her voice whispering, "Yes." As Adrian slipped the ring onto her finger, he drew his coat around her shoulders, just as he had on that first cold night. Together, they stood beneath the quiet sky, no longer bound by lies, but by a vow born of honesty, justice, and love. And for the first time, Emily felt truly free.